All right, welcome back, everybody, and welcome to Real Time for the Real Everyday Movie Fan. I am, of course, Josh Williams.
I'm Ryan Murphy.
And I'm James Sheridan.
Yep, and welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here today because we're here to give you our discussion, essentially. It's a discussion, like we've been doing previously with James and Ryan. But this time we're going to talk about things that we want to, like TV, like think something from a book or TV show. It doesn't matter. Something we want to see adapted either into a live action or animated or TV show or movie. So I think that's about right, guys. Am I in the right ballpark there?
Yep.
Yeah, my original idea was I was actually playing a game of Zelda, and people have been talking for years about doing a Zelda game or doing a Zelda movie.
That'd be good.
And I don't know if I find it difficult to conceptualize a film where the main character doesn't speak during the entire thing, but
yeah.
There's enough in the world to kind of make an interesting fantasy film. So I just kind of thought, what are some other things that we could pitch as ideas or things we want to see readdressed? Or, just stuff that we like that we would like to see on the big screen.
We can start with Zelda. I mean, it's one of those things you just can't believe they haven't made a movie about. The only real adaptation they've ever done of that is the crappy animated series in the 80s. And it's like, where is this? I mean,
I forgot about that.
I never even knew about that.
Well, excuse me, now. Princess. That was what Link always said every episode. Well, excuse me, princess. But
interesting.
It's really fascinating because, like, when you think, like, some things just, where the hell is that adaptation? When you think about how popular Spider-Man was, everyone knew who Spider-Man was. Like, I rewatched The Karate Kid in 1984, and when Mr. Miyagi saves Daniel, he goes, "Hey, where'd Spider-Man go?" It's like this character was in the lexicon for ages and ages. When you think there wasn't a movie until 2002, that's nuts.
That is kind
of
crazy.
Tried for a long time. Like, Canon Films had a adaptation for a long time. There was the James Cameron adaptation they were working on.
Yeah.
And the problem was that the rights bounced around to different studios at different points because, of course, Marvel had, a lot of financial troubles, especially in the 90s, and sold off a lot of their rights. And Spider-Man just kind of just hung in limbo.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really until first Blade and then X-Men kind of, demonstrated that you can make a good adaptation and that you can make a profitable one, because up until that point, we'd had Batman, we'd had Superman, but beyond that, nothing really worked.
Yeah. I'm glad you referenced Blade as one of the, because even though a lot of people say X-Men, I think Blade really did kick it off in 1998.
Well, I don't think it got it got people interested, but I don't think it really got people I don't think people clued into the fact that it was a comic book movie until a bit later. Like, it was sort of, I don't even want to say it was a cult status, but X-Men was certainly, it was huge,
much
just
bigger.
Colossal.
But but the idea is simply that Zelda is and even Mario Brothers. Again, you've had the one shitty Mario Brothers movie from the 90s, which I still can't help but love because I grew up with it. But
it's so corny.
They're making now. Illumination is making a new Mario animated movie. But yeah, you gotta wonder, where is the Zelda movie, live action or animated? And would it be better served by being an adaptation or some amalgamation of the games? Or should it be like a new adventure set within because the universe of Zelda has like 10 different links that in 10 different timelines that did different things, like they're reincarnations or something of the same guy. So you could just make a new one. But yeah, it's an excellent point. Where the hell is the Zelda movie finally,
I think the ones, when I look back at a lot of these video games that have been adapted into films, I think of the ones that are actually good and actually tell a story that's not necessarily connected to its source material. Case in point, I think Detective Pikachu, which is actually...
Damn it, Josh, you stole one of mine.
It just goes based off a game. You know what I mean? It goes based off a game that actually is Detective Pikachu, but it actually has its own story. Kind of the same thing. While I didn't like the ending, and actually the part that I didn't like was just based on the story aspect, but Warcraft is another really good example where it takes all the source material, it takes a lot of the characters, not characters, but a lot of the species and so forth, and tries to make its own story. Now, was the story that great towards the end? No, not really. but it goes to show that it was actually better than most of your comic book, not comic book, video game films. And you can say the same thing for Tomb Raider. You know what I mean? There's the ones that I think try and just completely, like what Mario Brothers did, where they just kind of stamp, the story onto the screen, and there you go. There's no surprise to it. There's no anticipation elements to it, and it's just kind of, it makes it seem corny, especially when they try and really just literally copy and paste onto the screen. So I think that's one of the things we got to take into account. So if we did get a Zelda, honestly, weirdly enough, I would like to see maybe some elements of some of his adventures, because it still can work, but I would like it a fresh story to help keep that anticipation in.
Yeah.
Another one that I want to throw in the ring for interesting video game adaptations. I'm going to come back to Pokemon because that's actually on my list.
Me too.
But Sonic the Hedgehog, I'm going to praise the hell out of that one because the story wasn't great, but it was a lot of fun. And the thing I really loved was that when the initial trailer came out, the initial fan reaction was not good because Sonic looked terrible. The effects looked terrible. And at an actual loss of money, they went back, paid the animators, and redid the entire movie. And I've always, I have a huge respect for doing that because, first of all, Hollywood studios are not known for taking gambles. They try and play it safe as much as they can. That's why we see so many sequels and adaptations and remakes and whatnot, because they're trying to play off, a specific fan base and whatnot, rather than having to sell a brand new idea. But in the case of Sonic, they actually listened to the feedback, went back at a financial loss. Not a loss because the movie ended up making money, but it was a risk to go back and do that because you could have, had taken a huge loss. And I actually really enjoyed the film.
I really did too, and I thought I completely agree with you. While it's good sometimes to take the criticisms from the fan base sometimes it's good, but also you don't want to handcuff yourself creatively to that as well. Like, I think something as simple like what they're talking about, just the look of them, is a very important thing. But if they were going to be angry about they saw a trailer and the story looks stupid, and all of a sudden they do a bunch of rewrites, I feel like you're almost handcuffing yourself to the audience just to give them what they want, but also
except they do that all the time with test audiences, where they get feedback from test audiences and they'll go back and do rewrites and reshoots based on those. I don't know how many movies I've heard of that have changed the ending, Scott Pilgrim being the one that comes to mind, where they completely changed the ending because test audiences didn't like the way it ended.
Which one was that?
Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Ice Age was the one where they actually initially killed the saber-toothed tiger at the end. In the original movie, the saber-toothed tiger, voiced by Dennis Leary, dies, and mothers were horrified. But
going back to Sonic, you're talking about if you're wondering if it was a success. I mean, it had a $95 million budget. You think maybe add on another $50 million for advertising? It made. I mean, the box office
usually
you
usually double the budget for advertising.
Typically depends on how much you do. So you always want to just guesstimate. So I mean, even if let's say it did $100 million advertising, it made $300 million, so it did make some money back. So that's I'm hoping for a sequel. I mean,
it's getting a sequel. They've been talking about it.
Yeah,
the story certainly set them up for one.
Yeah, it was considered a financial success, so they are planning a sequel. But I do think that they talk about the video game curse, and I think that's sort of old hat because everyone kind of skips over the fact that Tomb Raider, the original with Angelina Jolie, was pretty well received. So they're just there is no video game curse. Because when's there going to be one good one, dude? That was a well received one, therefore no curse. Stop talking about it.
I think what people talk about when they say that are ones that are critically acclaimed, getting kind of like what the Avengers, the MCU did, or Dark Knight. I think video game fans are wanting more of that. I think there is. I mean, Tom Holland is coming out with Uncharted very soon, and that, I mean, we said that with the newest Tomb Raider, that this could be the one that really gets the critical acclaim that people are buzzing about. But I mean, Tom Holland's a great actor, so I mean, we'll see. That one could be the one that really gets it there. But I remember me and Ryan thought Assassin's Creed with
No, I
Michael
never saw it.
Fassbender.
You said it was the worst thing that your eyes have ever beheld, next
Yeah.
to maybe Norm of the North.
I remember. Oh yeah, I know. I remember when that movie was over and the credits rolled and the lights came up. I didn't even mean to. I went, "Well, that sucked." Like I just said it out loud, and people just like laughed in the audience. It's like pretty much an agreement. Like it was pretty bad. I was surprised Michael Fassbender did it.
Well, we could go on about video game
anyways.
adaptations. There could be Samus or Metroid. They could they've yet to do certain ones. They could do a shared universe. Everyone wants to do the shared universe. They could do a shared universe and have them all come together in Super Smash Brothers, which I think would be freaking awesome.
That would be fun.
I would love to have like an actual. I always wish that there was an actual story to Super Smash Brothers where you get an actual story.
There are in each game. There's a story mode, but I don't know if it's enough to kind of make a movie out of it. It's usually just like they all kind of crash into the same universe, and there's some villain that they have to fight. And it becomes like the classic Avengers plot of, the superheroes come together to fight, but then they have a mutual enemy that they have to fight kind of situation. And I don't know if there's enough of plot to kind of do a Smash Brothers movie. I don't know, but
I mean, but you make the plot. You hire a great writer. You hire Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely to write it, and they'll write the crap out of it.
Right?
Those guys could write just about any. They've done such a great job with the Marvel movies, but
because they could like do it easy, do like an amalgamation of like doing like a DC multiverse kind of thing, but a video game multiverse, and then you add in like you do it like a Secret Wars like that, where they come into one universe to fight some big baddie. I know that'd be kind of interesting.
I mean, that is basically the premise.
I mean, it is, but I mean, that'd actually be very interesting. I wasn't much of a Smash Brothers player when I was younger. I mean, I don't know why, but
I keep trying to be because all my friends are, but I'm terrible at it.
One I want to talk about. I don't know if you guys even know. I just think this book series. It's also a game, like a board game, has potential to it had the potential to be like Lord of the Rings, but in space. And what I'm talking about is the Warhammer 40K universe. But do you guys know of Warhammer 40K or anything like that?
I know of it. I know that like they've got the little figurines and like people who are into it are like really into it, but it's never really sort of crossed my radar in terms of like something I've got an interest in picking up. It sort of falls into the same category as Warcraft and Starcraft and.
One of my best friends got me into it, at least like the figurines and stuff like that in the board gaming. And then I got into the lore, and it's just a really great story. Now, you would have to do it in a sense where you have to focus on one. Like the big popular ones are the Ultramarines. They're like kind of there's different factions within the Space Marines. But anyway, you'd almost have to focus on them versus one and adjust the world around them with all the different creatures and species, and you can just keep going on from there with different stories. I just think the lore in that is so rich, and like I said, it's basically like Lord of the Rings in space, minus the ring, of course. But you know what I mean? Like it's that that feel of it and that world of it. It's like that, but in space. Right. And I just think that would just be like you combine that with like a Star Wars feel to it. It has a lot of great potential. And they had a video game that came out with it called Space Marines.
So it's like it's a role-playing game then? The main thing is, or?
Yeah, sort of, yeah. It pretty much is. Like you get, you pick a species or a group and you play as that group within this board game. I never actually played the game, but I knew about it. I learned more about the lore through the books, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So, I mean, that to me would be one of the ones. I know you guys probably don't know much about it, but if I had to pick one, that would definitely be like one of the top ones on my list.
Cool.
What about you, Ryan?
Well, I want to say one because I think you might say it as well.
Okay.
I think that you and I are a fan. Yeah, but there's one book series that I'm pretty sure you guys haven't heard of. I'm going to be real surprised if you have, called The Chronicles of Prydain. This is a book.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, this is a book series that I got into because I was trying to watch all the Disney movies and as well as reading some of the canonical material that it's based on. So like, I would have to read The Legend of Sleepy Hollow before I watched that Disney version. So I read the Hunchback of Notre Dame before I saw the movie. And so anything that was based on something famous, I watched. And I was going to blow that off with The Black Cauldron because, yeah, it was based on books, but they're not really canonical or famous, right? And I had two people say, no, you have to read them. They're amazing. and I read them, and turns out they were actually very popular when they came out in the 60s, and they won like awards, and they were a popular book series. They tried to make movies of them for years until they ultimately made The Black Cauldron. The books have totally fallen into just complete obscurity, and then ironically, the movie, which is not even good, has become Disney's most obscure animated feature. I mean, we talk about the animated films of Disney, go back to the 80s, everyone can tell you The Fox and the Hound and The Great Mouse Detective, but no, like people haven't even heard of The Black Cauldron. It's fallen into obscurity, much like the books. It's not, if you guys have seen the movie, you probably know it's not a very good movie. But it is a phenomenal book series, and I read it, and it's some of the most emotional. When I got to the end of the series, the very end of the last book, it was one of the most emotional moments I've ever had finishing a book or a series. It just overwhelmed me with emotion that it was over, had such a satisfying ending. And I was like, this has to get more appreciation. So it was in the 60s. It was an American writer named Lloyd Alexander who wrote it. So about 10 years after the Chronicles of Narnia, but it's similar to Narnia and Lord of the Rings. It's a high fantasy series about a young man who's very typical sort of protagonist. He's an assistant pig keeper. He's like a low class farmer, but he has this high destiny, and he gathers a merry band of misfits around him and goes on adventures against the evil Horned King. But really, everyone I talk to who has heard of it, which is rare. I mean, this is really, really kind of obscure stuff today. But I think I've encountered a total of 4 people in my life who have actually read the series, and they all have positive things to say. So
I'm definitely not one. Never actually heard of it, but it does sound, I'll admit, it does sound interesting.
Disney does own the rights now, so I'll just say that Disney reacquired the rights after a while, so they're not really planning on anything with it right now. But
like just like Warhammer 40K, I feel like that sounds like, for Warhammer 4K, I think it'd be best served as like a long time TV series, kind of like Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas something like what you're like, that show, I could easily see that being like a Disney show for like half hour an episode and be pretty good, from what it sounds like.
Well, it would have to be like a series of movies, kind of like the Chronicles of Narnia, where we're turned into a series of movies. And there's
aren't
like
they doing
6
a Chronicles? They're doing a Chronicles of Narnia show, right?
But they were going to readapt because they made the first three books into movies, and they were going to readapt the first 3 and then finish it out on Netflix. But they were going to be Netflix movies, and that was years ago. They said that, and that hasn't happened yet. So it's one of those things that's just kind of thing they might do eventually. But that would have to be the kind of a similar thing for Prydain.
Gotcha. All right. Well, hopefully somebody's listening and the studio will greenlight it. All right, James, what do you got next?
This one's kind of a cheat because it's an author who I want to see. Like, he's got a bunch of different books that I really love. He's actually my favorite author. His name is John Scalzi, and he writes a lot of like sci-fi stuff. And there's 3 of them that I kind of want to pitch as ideas. The first one, Ryan already knows and he hates. So this is going to be a tough pitch, but it's one of my favorite books of all time, and it's Red Shirts, which is sort of set in, it's a parody of Star Trek, where it's a very sort of like meta and self-aware sort of story, where it's about, if you know the classic series of Star Trek, the characters traditionally called Red Shirts are, usually the guys who show up in the background and go down with all the like main characters, but there'll be like one guy in red who dies almost immediately upon landing on the planet, or when the ship blows up or the like bridge blows up, the one guy that goes flying across the bridge and dies is usually in a red shirt. And the story is about the sort of a Star Trek type universe from their perspective, and they start to notice very weird things about the ship that they're on, and that every once in a while, all of the main characters, like the bridge crew, turns kind of weird, and they start talking in like very weird, stilted ways, like they would on a TV show. And they start making like weird, irrational decisions, and they refer to it as getting trapped in the narrative. So most of the crew has kind of figured out, gotta hide, we gotta, get away from all of this, but they keep bringing on new people to fill the holes when all of these other characters die, to be fodder for this background. And it's told from their perspective of trying to figure out how to beat the narrative. And it goes into some like strange, bizarre places. And it's just, I love the book. It loves breaking the fourth wall and kind of poking fun at tropes in sci-fi, tropes in Star Trek specifically. But it's also like, there's a certain point where like the characters are kind of like talking to you, but not talking to you. And it's just, it's so good. It's such a good one. The other two by him as well, like, any of his books I would love to see adapted, but the two that are probably best to adapt would be Old Man's War, which is actually a series where all of these people on Earth who like reach the age of 75 agree to be conscripted into this intergalactic military where they're given young bodies, these young alien bodies, and given a second chance at life, but they have to serve like 5 years in this military. And it's sort of political, but it's also like, again, it's very sort of, he's very good with wordplay, and the character's dialogue is really great. And I'm not pitching Old Man's War very well because I actually forget a lot of it. I wasn't as big a fan of it, but it still would be a good, interesting series. The third one that I want to pitch is, it's actually a 2-book series at the moment. It's called Lock-In, and it's about a world where there was a disease called Hayden's disease, which basically destroys your body neurologically. So you're still in your brain, you still can think and feel and like sort of function, but like you're comatose in a way. Like you're aware, but you're not actually physically able to do anything. So they kind of connect you into robots, and you physically control these robots. And it's actually about one of these people in his first job as an FBI agent investigating a murder involving these people. And like, he does a really good job of world building and kind of, discussing this whole history of this disease and like the legislation that got enacted about it, and, the culture and sort of the bigotry surrounding them, because, there's always going to be bigotry involving people who are different and whatnot. And yeah, I love John Scalzi. So those would be like, I think Red Shirts would make a great series. Old Man's War would make a great movie, a great series. And Lock-In, I think, would make a good one-off movie.
Well, yeah, that was, you said I hated, I don't know if I would say I hated Red Shirts. I got the book, I think it was because I think you recommended it actually, James. And
that wouldn't surprise me.
Well, it was also, because we had talked about, I know all three of us love Ready Player One. And Josh and I and our friends all kind of experienced it through the audiobook read by Will Wheaton. I'm not sure if that's the way you experienced it, James.
Yep.
But yeah, so
I have ADHD, so I have a hard time actually reading. So I do all my reading through audiobook.
Well, yeah. So like, and everyone says, and we all kind of agree with all our friends and everything, that like, that's the way to go because it's so good read by Will Wheaton. And I think that it came up because you recommended Red Shirts, which was also narrated by Will Wheaton. And the author Scalzi is one of the authors mentioned by Wade in Ready Player One when he goes down the whole list, the epic list of all the titles he's read and all the authors he's read over the years. Yeah, John Scalzi is one of those. So, but I wasn't crazy about Red Shirts, but I didn't hate it. I would certainly, I'd be down for reading some more of his stuff. So.
Yeah, it's not, I don't think it's a series that everybody would enjoy. It's definitely got sort of, not quite a community kind of vibe, but still it's sort of like meta, not quite fourth wall breaking, but like it loves to play on tropes and it loves to kind of like poke fun at these things while still being sort of a loving tribute to Star Trek and sci-fi and all of these things. So most people I know who read it usually end up loving it. So it's one I've wanted to see for a long time. They were in talks to do a series, but I think that kind of fell through, and I haven't heard anything about it in a long time.
So for me, one of the ones to segue to one of the ones on my list, it's actually one that's been done already into a film. It was such a dumpster fire. I think it could be done better service. And I am talking about Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah.
I Okay, I've got one to bridge off of this when you're done then.
Okay, cool. Because that movie
Did you
was
say
just
Airbender?
yeah,
No.
Okay.
it's just as bad. Um,
Good
but
Lord.
Dragon Ball Z is such a great show. I think Ryan, you said you watched Dragon Ball, and then now you're watching
Fucking
Dragon Ball
hate
Z.
Dragon Ball. Like,
I
dude,
loved Dragon
I
Ball.
have
It was
watched that
fun.
show for the sake of being the nerd, right? The two things I never got into as a nerd were Dragon Ball Z and Dungeons and Dragons. And so I finally decided to watch Dragon Ball. And just because I am so obsessed with being the completest nerd and watching what I need to watch in order to punch my card, I have sat through 150 some odd episodes of that shit show. And it's just so freaking dumb. But
if I could make a suggestion, Ryan, try Dragon Ball Super. It's a little more modern and the action's a little more updated. And you'll get a sense of the characters, and it'll make it easier to go back to watch the older stuff, and it won't feel as dated when you watch it. Super's not as good as Dragon Ball Z, but it's still a lot of fun.
Yeah, I can agree with that too. Since I grew up watching Dragon Ball Z, I've watched Dragon Ball Super, but to me, it's just not the same.
No, of course not.
I don't know if you agree with me. Yeah, but no, just the show is so enriched, and you don't even have to tell the same stories. Like as long as you have the same characters, you can tell the stories in a different way. I mean, that lore, that world is so enriched with different stories you can tell, and still include the same characters. Like to me, one of the best ones was like the Cell saga was instantly one of the best overarching stories of the whole show. Is definitely one of the more complex because it deals with time travel, and so that kind of gets into that whole different things. But I feel like if you were going to do it, I would definitely just do it at the beginning. You wouldn't even have to tell him Goku as a kid. You can just have him throw into it. He's an adult. He's got a kid on the way, and you can kind of tell his story throughout the movie, and then just have him fight his brother Raditz, and just kind of go from there and thrust yourself in there even further.
I would kind of like to see him as a kid training with Roshi, because that was so
though,
iconic to his journey.
It was, and I still think you could do that with flashbacks, like with him just training in his own way, like training by himself, and he has flashbacks of training with his father. And I felt like they tried that with the Dragon Ball Z movie, and it just didn't work. It just didn't work for me, especially how they introduced Piccolo and all that other stuff. I feel like there's a way it can be done, and I feel like I think one way it could be done is to just kind of maybe lean into its serious / ridiculousness that it has. Like it has a serious tone to it, but it also has its funny moments. And we've seen numerous movies that can do that properly. But the aesthetic has to be there and just everything else. And I think the technology we're at now, we could do it again. You know what I mean? We could actually make this possibly good. Just gotta, it's all in the story. That's all it really is. And so that and good acting. Because the one kid who was in it, I can't remember his name, but he was good in a couple different movies. But in that movie, he was just abysmal.
Justin Chow. Yeah. I don't know. I thought the movie had pretty good casting. I mean, I watched the whole everything it was based on before I watched the movie. The whole first few seasons of the TV show, just so I could finally watch the movie. And I mean, first of all, as a big Buffy fan, I'm not going to complain about James Marsters as Piccolo or James Marsters as anyone. And it's funny because I've seen him so many times in person. He goes to every Wizard World. I always try, because I know he's not going to recognize me. I always try and be the guy that brings out Dragon Ball. and he's like, yeah, that sucked. Sorry. I'm not a fan, but God, I was such a fan of the anime. So I really wanted to make a good movie, but so he talks about every time I see him about that. But yeah, I mean, hey, it's who knows? Maybe it could be good.
Possibly. That's all I can hope for.
Yeah. So bridging off of Josh's suggestion of Dragon Ball Z, I'm not the biggest Dragon Ball fan. I do like anime, and my favorite anime is Naruto. And I would love to see a well-done Naruto. I don't think it can be done, just because of how many anime have been done so poorly. And because Naruto is such an expansive world and mythology, and like it stretches back hundreds of years, thousands of years, and the final 200 episodes of the show take place over 3 days.
The final 200 okay.
Yeah, it's a 700 episode series.
Holy shit.
700 manga. Yeah. I mean, that's nothing. One Piece is over 1,000 or no, it's over 800, 900 episodes now, and it's like nowhere even near being done. It's still going, and it's going to be going forever. But I absolutely love Naruto. It's actually helped me through some really dark times.
One of the things I'm always... Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, we keep talking about a lot of these shows, and like I think a lot of times, oh, this would be such good as a movie. Like I feel like Dragon Ball Z, you can make them in movies because they are separated that way. As long as you make them a long movie, like 2.5 hours, I'm okay with that. But something like Naruto, like I personally never watched it. Yep. I always had the idea of watching it, just never pulled the trigger. And so my question is like how you phrase that there. Would you think it'd be best suited as a movie or a live action TV show? Because it seems like these days, with all the streaming services we have, like even Lord of the Rings is now going TV show. Like, do you think it'd be better serviced for its lore and the meat of that story to be more of a TV show, or do you want to see it as a movie?
I do think that there is snippets you can do to make actual movies. Like they're not going to tell the entire story of Naruto just because there's too much to tell. There's too much backstory. There's too much forestory to kind of get through. But I do think, like, especially the first few arcs, there's a lot of good meat there. It's mostly just that I want to see these characters in live action and want to see how they'd be kind of adapted and done. I don't have much hope that it would be done well, but it's still sort of this self-indulgence of like, I grew up, I wanted to see Spider-Man on film, and I got to see that. Now Naruto is one of those ones that I would love to see done live action. Sister series to that I also want to pitch would be a newer series called My Hero Academia.
Oh boy, yeah, there's lots of guys who watch that.
That is, it's possibly my favorite ongoing show right now, and it's set in a world where like 80% of the population has superpowers, and superheroes are sort of the number one job. And it's about this kid who doesn't actually have superpowers. He's born without them. But he is like the biggest nerdy fanboy about superheroes, and he knows like everything about everyone. And he has a like chance meeting with the number one superhero, who's sort of like a Superman analog. And the kid gets a chance to go to basically a superhero high school. And it's about his sort of journey. I'm not really pitching it very well, and a lot of people compare it to Sky High. So a lot of people are like, "But they already did that," and it's not the same thing at all.
Yeah.
And I think that
actually that gives me another idea. I know we had to kick Ryan in there, but I got
Sorry.
another anime. I got another anime in mind. Now Naruto was actually it's a good choice. Like I said, I haven't watched it yet. I just know there probably is a lot of lore there. When talking about anime though, just popped in my head because you talked about ones that seemed like something else, but it wasn't. Like I would love to see a Gundam Wing live action. But now
did you see the real robot they made?
Yeah,
no,
that was amazing.
No, I haven't. What is it? They made a real robot?
They made a real fucking not Voltron, Gundam robot.
Really?
Like it's like it's remote controlled, but it's like like Google it.
Yeah, it actually moves, like it crouches and bends, and
that's
like
awesome.
I don't think it doesn't walk because it's got to be sort of stationary, but it's sort of like set up on a gimbal and pulley system, and like the shots I saw was actually like kneeling down.
That's cool. Well,
yeah, and it's like life size, like several stories of a building tall.
So I guarantee if people see it, they're just gonna be like, "Oh, well, it's just like Pacific Rim," because Pacific Rim kind of came first, but Gundam came first as far as the lore and everything. I just think
that was like when the Incredibles came out, and then the Fantastic Four movie came out the next year, and there was a magazine cover that called the Fantastic Four: The New Incredibles.
Yep. True. It's true. But I just think Gundam was such a great show, I think, as well, and I think that one could easily be like, because there's certain ones I feel like it tells a good story. Like I feel like Naruto, even though I haven't seen it, from what you've said, I think it'd be best fit as a long time TV show. Whereas I feel like Gundam could easily be one that could just be broken down to some robot action, smashing things and so forth. Kind of just don't need to tell like a great story, just something very simple, and it's mainly for the action.
Yeah, the giant robot thing is kind of, with the exception of Transformers, has been sort of an under, and Pacific Rim, but like even like Power Rangers and Voltron haven't had a great showing. Like Voltron series are great, but like doing a live action one, I'd be all in for it. I've never watched Gundam, but I'd go see a giant robot smashing things kind of movie. So like I paid for way too many of the Transformers movies. That said, I will defend Bumblebee to the end of my days.
Bumblebee's great.
Yes.
Oh,
Bumblebee-
you guys.
Bumblebee is
That's
awesome.
still my favorite review that we've done is Josh's reaction when he turns to me and he's like, I'm really anxious to hear what you have to say. I'm really worried. And I go, I'm going to give it like a 3 out of 10. He goes, what the
I was like, oh my God. I was just like, oh my God.
I'll go on more and more, but what about you? I'm really anxious to hear your score.
I am going to give this movie a 3.5 out of 10.
Oh my God! Hear your score.
I am going to give this movie a 3.5 out of 10.
Oh my God! What?
3.5. But it's overrated. But whatever, James. I'm not gonna.
I disagree. I think it was great. I loved it. It was exactly what I wanted from a Transformers movie.
Exactly.
And
there wasn't exactly a whole lot of plot twists in that movie, was there? It was E.T. and Mac and Me and all those movies over again. But
I'm so surprised Mac and Me. That was actually the first movie I ever saw in theaters, and it's actually got like a big place in my heart because of it. But I smile every time somebody mentions it.
But me and James Oh, go ahead.
It's terrible. Like they did an episode of when they brought back Mystery Science Theater 3000. One of the first episodes was Mac and Me because it's just such a terrible film, but I love it to death.
Interesting. Well, me and James have been going on and on about anime, and we may come back rolling onto it, but Ryan hasn't got to say something on his list yet. So Ryan, what do you have?
1 second, my phone's gonna die. Give me 30 seconds.
Oh my God.
Oh my gosh, really? Well, while we fill the time in, folks, we apologize for Ryan just running off like that. I hope he doesn't cut this out. I hope he keeps this the same to show his shame. To show his shame for leaving.
It's called the miracle of editing. And they're not seeing our faces, so it doesn't matter.
I was going to suggest that me and Josh talk about all the movies that Ryan doesn't like.
It's true.
30 more seconds.
There's a lot of them that he doesn't like.
Yeah, I've had many arguments with him over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
There's quite a few more, I think could be done really well as far as
it's not hard. Just talk about Terminator sequels and Star Wars sequels. And
I'm with you on Terminator, but I disagree with you hardly on Star Wars.
I just don't get it.
That's fine. You don't have to.
It's the most lazy. It's the most lazy idea ever. No, same shit, different cast. Okay. Anyway. So, and cut. I would say, Josh, if you're not going to bring it up, ANIMORPHS.
Oh my God! Yeah.
I had a feeling this was coming.
Was the very first adaptation for me. It was like my baptism into being a fanboy. It was the first adaptation that I was like, this sucks. This isn't like the book. Why didn't you make this like the book? We all remember Animorphs, or James maybe not because you're a little bit older than us, but
I remember it.
Okay, we all remember the books they took their audience very seriously. They were dark. They really got into the psychology of what it must be like for these kids being the saviors of the world. And then they turned it into this really dumbed down Nickelodeon show, which just took away so much of the mystique, so much of the drama. It was really dumbed down because it was Nickelodeon. I mean, they were getting their body parts hacked off at times in the books because they grew them back, but it was still painful. It was just the books would get really dark and really dramatic, and that was something that I really miss. And I think we've all wanted to see. They're talking, or Scholastic's talking about trying to make a movie now. And I just don't see it as a movie at all. It's not movie material. It's a TV show or nothing really. So, but yeah, I mean, that was my first big fanboy thing. Not only as an adaptation, but also as just something I loved and fell in love with the characters. Before there was Buffy, before there was Firefly, before there was even comic books, there was Animorphs. So
yeah, I remember reading those books too when I was a kid, and those were. They had a little bit of a dark side to them, just a little bit, the hacking of limbs.
What year was the show?
Oh, it's like the 90s.
Yeah, it was late 90s, like 98.
Yeah,
it was
98,
Shawn Ashmore. I think the only
one.
No,
I saw a few episodes. Just I was well into high school at that point, so like the Scholastic books were not my forte anymore.
Yeah.
I guess that shows the age gap because I mean, in the late 90s, I was only 10, 11, 9, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
So speaking of, what was that?
That's just my computer doing that. Does that every now and then.
Speaking of books, there's one I want to talk about. It's a book from Star Wars lore, and I feel like Star Wars is at a perfect time, and it's it's a perfect time frame where they need to start telling different stories and expanding their world, even going either back in time or forward in time.
You're gonna
Matter.
say Coder.
No, actually.
No?
It's my favorite story of any Star Wars book I've ever read. It's my favorite story. And I'd love to do KOTOR. KOTOR would be great. I would love to see that. Actually, I'd love to see that more as a TV show than anything. But what I'm talking about, I think it's finally time to tell a villain story, and I'd love to have them tell Darth Bane's story. Now, Darth Bane is still technically now canon because he appeared in, I believe, Clone Wars briefly with Yoda. So he is canon within the Disney world. I just feel like now it's the time to go back in time and tell some of these great stories. And I feel like Darth Bane would be a perfect one. It's very dark, very gritty. It's a guy who's in his I think he's like his mid 20s or 30s. Doesn't know he's with the Force, but he goes to work for the Sith in some mine, and eventually he finds out he has the Force, and he gets trained by the Sith, and eventually kills them off to create the Rule of Two. I mean, how good of a story would that be to finally tell where the Rule of Two came from within the Star Wars world and with Darth Bane? So I think that, to me, would be a perfect, good 2-hour, 20-minute story.
2 hours, 20 minutes. It's very specific.
What's that?
You have a very specific time code stamp. 2 hours, 20 minutes.
I mean, because you don't want to do it too long, but you don't want to do it too short. Sure. I mean, anywhere between 2 hours and 2 hours and 30 minutes would be perfect. I feel like for this,
most of the Star Wars were in that ballpark range, weren't they?
Yeah, 2 hours, 2 hours 10. I just feel like this one you could tell a little bit more meat, a little, leak it to 20 minutes. 20 minutes can tell a lot of story. So I feel like that would be a great one-off film, and you could possibly open it to a sequel, because there is a sequel to Darth Bane's story where he takes on a Padawan. But I feel like that would just be such a good story to tell if Disney wanted to really get people back into the theaters for Star Wars. You could even go like a Rogue One feel and aesthetic to it easily and still make it work well. So, James, what do you got?
My next one is actually, it's a book too, and this is going to sound weird, but I actually haven't read the book, but I'm familiar with the story because it's actually based on a real events. It's called Devil in the White City.
Yeah, they want to make
never read that.
I've heard that they're making it. I'm not sure if it's actually going to happen because until casting and cameras roll, I don't hold my breath about anything actually happening. So because like they've said for years, Red Shirts is going to happen, and like we said, ANIMORPHS, at different points they've talked about. And but Devil in the White City is actually about Chicago in 1893 because they had the Columbia World Fair or World whatever the exhibition or whatever they call it, which if you know anything about the White City, it was this beautiful expo of like architecture and design and science and technology. And I think like one of the first Ferris wheels in the world was actually presented there, and it was huge. Like the cars were giant on it. And juxtaposed against that in the same city is America's first serial killer. Well, said to be the first serial killer. There's some debate. H.H. Holmes. And what's fascinating about H.H. Holmes is that he built a hotel to serve the people who would be coming to the World's Fair, because obviously there's going to be a lot of tourism and whatnot. And with this hotel, he had a lot of like secret passageways and like doors that locked weird so that people couldn't escape, and had like they called it a murder castle. And he would take people who were staying there, disappear them, take them down, and like do all kinds of like terrible things to them, and then sell their body parts to signs and whatnot. And it's a very macabre story, but I think it would make a great sort of horror film, sort of like period horror film. Because the story is absolutely fascinating. I'm not doing a great job pitching it, but I think that both this World's Fair and this sort of like exciting time of technological advancement and cultural advancement and whatnot, and then there's this just horrible monsters just preying on people who are coming to the city at the time. I think it would make a great movie.
Well, yeah, because Scorsese is the one that's planning on making it, but it's really so yeah. It could be a great movie. I mean, it could be a Scorsese movie, but I mean, it's really Leonardo DiCaprio's baby. I think Leo is really the one who is a fan of the book and I think bought the rights to the book or is trying to get the movie made. And Marty's just sort of the one that he's bugging to make it. It's really more on Leo's side of things. I know they've announced their next project is Killers of the Flower Moon. That they're doing together, but who knows? Maybe Devil in the White City will be after that. I also know they also want to do the Rise of Theodore Roosevelt together. So we'll see. But yeah, that's on Scorsese's bucket list.
Awesome, man. How old is Scorsese now?
Gotta be
late 70s now.
Siri, how old is Martin Scorsese?
Gotta love technology.
Martin Scorsese is 77 years old.
Man.
But he's Martin Scorsese. He said before, "I'm going to die behind a camera."
That's true.
And Clint Eastwood is like old than that. He's in his 80s, and well, he doesn't make good movies anymore. But no, well, maybe.
Well, Ryan,
But,
what do you have? Ryan, what do you have on your list? Or is that
after Animorphs?
Because James just brought up his. I was just curious if you had another one.
I would say, talk about readaptations. I would think that, you guys know how much I abhor, hate, loathe the Star Wars sequel trilogy. And I admire what DC, I'm going to merge these two ideas. I admire what DC has done with their, making 4 direct-to-video animated films a year, like just churning them out like no one's business and just adapting like every story that DC's ever done into an animated movie. I'd like to see Lucasfilm jump on that train and have stories that take place in different timelines, because I would love to see adaptations of the original, what's now called the Legends timeline, which was for those who don't know, is the original timeline. In 1991, they started writing books that took place after Return of the Jedi. They continued to do so for about 30 years, building this entire lore of the next 30 years in the chapters of in the lives of these characters, which was totally ignored by the movies, which in and of itself is not a terrible thing as long as they made something good. They did not. And I would love to see like the Thrawn trilogy, which was the first in 1991, the first trilogy of books that took place after Return of the Jedi. I would love to see that, starting with that and then moving forward, being adapted into like an animated direct-to-video movie. So that, they just throw it out there the way DC does. It doesn't have to be a big deal. It doesn't have to make $1 billion, and it would just satisfy a lot of fans. And there's so many people now who are dissatisfied with the way the trilogy turned out that I think a lot more people would be open to seeing the alternate timeline play out.
I would like to see an adaptation of Shadows of the Empire, which was, I love the game, I love the book. Yeah, that's, if they were going to go that way, then that's one I would definitely want to see. Yeah.
The main thing I want to get with is that in the original Legends timeline, get this, Luke Skywalker. Oh my gosh, this is such a crazy idea. You guys are gonna love this. Luke Skywalker rebuilds the Jedi Order. I know. Just like they said he would at the end of Return of the Jedi. It was crazy. They actually fulfilled the promise instead of reneging on it and having Rey go through the exact same fucking story. But yes, I would love to see the Jedi Order, the second Jedi Order in the world of animation. So
they now, technically speaking, he did create the second Jedi Order.
Oh my god!
We just didn't see it on screen. We just didn't see it on screen. So in the lore,
he had like some Padawans that got massacred, and you never fully completed training a Jedi, as far as it showed. Whatever.
That's
fine.
I will say I read those when I was a kid, the Thrawn and all those, and I thought they were okay. I thought they were good. I don't know, I don't know if Disney's gonna pull that kind of trigger to do an alternate reality like that. I mean, I don't see Disney willing to risk their bank on something like that. I mean, like DC and Warner Brothers would easily willing to do that. Mm-hmm. Now, are you saying if they were to do this, would you be okay with them just doing like direct to video or direct to streaming, like short films, like the animated ones? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
like
like
that.
not short films, but feature films, like the way DC is doing, like feature direct to streaming, but still
I could see
but still
that.
feature length. Yeah.
Interesting. James, I'm gonna let you go next. I had one in my brain, but I completely lost it. So let me look back at my list. And what do you got on yours?
My next one, it's going back to the video game conversation, and we actually brought this up before. I want to see a different adaptation of Pokemon.
Yes.
Don't get me wrong, I love Detective Pikachu. I know you didn't like the ending. I loved the ending. To me, that was my favorite part of it. I love the entire movie. The only thing I didn't like was they did my boy Greninja dirty. That said, I really want to see a Pokemon that's more about sort of the traditional story, because each of the games and even the series is about somebody training to become champion, to battle in gyms and do actual battling. And we only really got one scene of battling. Like there were Pokemon kind of fighting and whatnot, but it wasn't like sort of a traditional like Pokemon versus Pokemon battle where the trainer sort of calling out, do this move, do that move, Pikachu Thunderbolt and all that stuff. And,
oh yeah.
I think that seeing that journey, I would really like to see a film adaptation of that, a live action one.
Now,
because if Detective Pikachu showed me anything, it's that you can do that world, you can make it look good, and you can do interesting stories in that world.
That was one of the great things I liked about Detective Pikachu is like the aesthetic looked really good, and the Pokemon actually looked pretty good too, given the CG is concerned, especially Pikachu. And there's some other ones that didn't look the greatest, but you can easily fix that. Now, what I want to come back at you with, because my answer will come afterwards, is: are you wanting them to completely do a reboot or continue on within Detective Pikachu world? Because they did. No,
I want it to be in Detective Pikachu's world, because they've already established, the look and the feel, and that that these things happen, and it doesn't like have to be any of the same characters bridging over, and it doesn't even have to be like a traditional character, because obviously Red didn't talk, and like most of the characters don't have a lot of personality in the games because it's sort of supposed to be an analog for the player. And of course, I mean, we've done Ash to death. Let him be an anime thing. I'm fine with him being where he is, but I do think that a trainer going on a journey would be a fun story. Even if it's, a little more geared towards kids than doing sort of a little more serious, but it's Pokemon. Of course, there's going to be,
that's what I feel like I feel like Detective Pikachu did a really good job of going the kid friendly, but also realizing their actual core audience is us adults. Yeah. That's where people grew up on. So they kind of had a serious tone with it as well. I feel like you could continue on. I would agree. I don't want to see Ash Ketchum. I would love to, but I don't. At the same time, I feel like, again, when I go back to what I said about fresh new stories, you'd almost have to have the similar journey, but have a different character, a different companion. I'd even be okay with this companion not being in the Pokeball, just kind of getting to know them.
And don't let it be Pikachu, please. We've done Pikachu to death. There are 900 other Pokemon.
Yep, and that's to say, a different type of Pokemon that he can be a companion with and walk around with.
Do a movie about Eevee. Eevee's adorable. Everyone loves Eevee.
I don't know. Maybe Eevee. Maybe we'll see. You have to go with ones definitely. Yeah, the Eevee's definitely one of the ones that are very popular within, when you think of Pokemon. But
you guys are saying don't do Ash, don't do Pikachu. I mean, I would like to see a live action adaptation of the original series with Ash and Pikachu. I mean, just like
interesting.
Say it's been done to death, but that's been done to death within the world of video games, and we haven't seen the live action adaptation of that. So, I mean, I would still be down for something that adapts the original material that we all grew up on, the adventures of Ash, Brock, and Misty and their Pokemon, with Pikachu being, him going, and just like in the video game, you're supposed to get either a Squirtle, a Charmander, or a Bulbasaur. And in
the first gen, there's other starters in the other games.
Yeah, but we're going full nostalgia here. The original game and the original series plays
that's something that I have a problem with, is that we're always stuck in Kanto, and I would like to see other regions explored. Acknowledge that there's a bigger world than just Kanto.
I feel like that's...
you might even want to do one of the more recent ones just to tie into the games, because there's, Cubfu would be a great one, even though he's a mythical, not a starter Pokemon. But there's just all kinds of great Pokemon out there, and I just want to see something other than the original 151, other than Pikachu, and other than like the same things we've seen over and over again.
I can agree with that, but I don't think you want to start off there. I feel like if you really want to build a world and keep it going, like if you want to really do something like an Avengers style, you got to start off very small and then work your way outward. So I feel like going into Kanto would be the beginning. You just got to make a good story, you got to make a good world, and expand from there.
You gotta walk before you can run.
Exactly. So I feel like staying in Kanto would be fine. I don't know. I would love to see Ash, like I said, but I feel like because there was even an animated series on Hulu where it was just about Red. The character Red, an animated series.
Yeah, that series was so good.
That series was great, and and it could easily be him. Like it could be, it doesn't have to be Red. It could be anybody, but they still would choose Bulbasaur, Squirtle, or Charmander, and just kind of go off from there. I just feel like that could be a good way to do it. But even if they did Ash, Ketchum, and Pikachu, don't just, like I said, don't copy and paste the same story, because then there's no. It's just seeing it on the big screen for nostalgia factor, and you're not getting anything out of it. You got to be able to tell a fresh story as well to be able to keep people interested.
Yeah, there's the formula, but we can still get a fresh story within that formula of someone training to be champion. Any character can fit into that. Any Pokemon can fit into that. It's not about who you put there. It's about the story you tell, the adventure they take.
Mm-hmm. Very true. All right, so for me, the other one I had in mind, it's, I don't know, it's not something too huge by any stretch of the imagination. It's nothing like, I just think it's been a while since we've seen a really good adaptation, especially in the films. They tried it with the Chris Hemsworth movie, but I'd love to see a really good Moby Dick readaptation. I know we're going a different way, completely different way. Yeah. But I had it on my list. Like even that one or 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I think I'm saying that wrong. But either one or the other. I just feel like a good creature sea film would actually be really refreshing. Like I said, I tried it with The Heart of the Sea with Chris Hemsworth. Heart of the Sea, yeah. It did not work. I just feel like a real true, Moby Dick film would actually be really good to be able to see. And I feel like it's going back to all those old, like even a good Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde film would be really great.
It's basically Victorian literature. Anything that the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen adapted.
Pretty much, but done right. Done with a serious tone like the books were supposed to be. I just feel like that would be a really good choices.
Well, it could also be a readaptation of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which I've never read, but I've heard nothing but amazing things about, and everyone agrees the movie was awful. The movie, so I mean, they could just try and redo League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Very possible.
So,
yeah, it's a very, very different story from the movie, and I don't know if the characters are fascinating, the world is fascinating, the idea of bringing them together is fascinating, but I think you'd have to. I mean, it's been a long time since I've read it, but I don't remember the story being one that kind of pulled me towards doing a movie. I think you'd have to kind of, create a new sort of.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But I do think that's an era of literature, and kind of bridging off that, I'd like to see more sort of Lovecraftian horror and Cthulhu kind of stuff. I know they're doing. I think it's HBO is doing Lovecraft Country or something like that. I haven't actually seen it, so I don't know if it's even close to the books, but I'd love to see a period sort of story told that way.
Is it based on H.P. Lovecraft stories?
I don't know. I honestly don't.
I mean, I figured it was just because it has Lovecraft in the name. I haven't done the research on that yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know anything about it other than that the series exists.
Mm-hmm.
And that I should have done my research, but that wasn't even what I was thinking of. Just when you mentioned League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, that's sort of a similar era and sort of a similar aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and to be fair, I haven't actually read any Lovecraft. I'm familiar with the look and the feel and the sort of arcane horror kind of.
Mm-hmm.
I love that sort of vintage.
Cool.
Feel.
Yeah, I've always loved those books, reading those. I haven't seen one. They did a couple good direct-to-TV Moby Dick stories. Nothing that was just stood out to me. I just feel like there hasn't been one that's really pushed the boundaries per se. And even with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I don't think I've ever seen one that's actually, unless it's the classic black and white. But other than that,
I don't think they've made a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde adaptation that I know of it since the 1930s one.
Well, they did
So,
one. They did
we're
one
due
Dr.
for one.
Jekyll and Mrs. Hyde back in the '90s, which was pretty awful. But that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I would like to see an adaptation of Frankenstein done again, like something more similar to the book kind of thing.
They
That
tried
one's
it.
been done a lot. Wasn't that when Kenneth Branagh's version was probably the closest to the book in '94?
Yeah, isn't that the one that has
De Niro as the monster. Hey, you get in my face.
I actually never saw it because I heard terrible things about it, so I'm not sure. But I just like that. Again, that sort of era of horror and sort of look and design.
If the Universal gets their monster universe right, I mean, they had a good showing with the Invisible Man, so hopefully they'll build off of that.
Yeah, I actually started watching that the other day.
Oh,
that was
the
great.
That
was the great disappointment for them because they had their monster universe ready to go. They had a big picture taken with Javier Bardem, who was cast as the monster, and Johnny Depp, who was cast as the
what's his
Invisible
name? Was cast as Hyde too.
Russell Crowe.
Russell Crowe.
And it just never happened. I mean, literally, I've never seen that where they actually have a press photo of the actors for a movie that doesn't end up happening. Like
because the Mummy was shit.
Yeah.
Did it make money?
No. No.
Was it a box office bomb?
I think it lost money.
It killed the idea. It literally opens up with the Dark Universe logo trying to be like the Marvel Studios logo, like this is our new shared universe, and it never went anywhere. I mean, literally, they pulled the plug on Bride of Frankenstein like just before shooting. Like they were building the sets, and Angelina Jolie and Javier Bardem were in it, and they literally just were like, we're done, go home. Like everybody's home.
It makes me because the budget was $195 million, but they made $410 million. So I don't know. But it was just bombed by critics and by audience members. I mean, it was just destroyed by both. So they just
I didn't see it because it didn't look that great. So
it wasn't. Don't worry, it sucked. James, what do you got? What's coming up on your list?
I'm debating between which ones I want to mention. I'm going to do this one just because it's kind of obscure, but I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Tamara Pierce.
Yeah.
She's another writer. She writes a series of books set in a universe called Tortal. They're sort of medieval fantasy, but they're all about girls. And I'm sort of like a big proponent for like representation, and especially since my niece was born, about having very strong female characters. And this is a really great one. A friend of mine actually put me onto it. It's sort of like coming of age knights and like women of power, and like one of them is a sort of mage who can like talk to animals and transform into animals. And the first book, which is the one that most people love, called Song of the Lioness, is about a girl who poses as a boy and goes through like the page program at their sort of not local kingdom, but like their kingdom. And she sort of slowly becomes a knight, and it's about, the things that young girls go through and about women trying to break into men's worlds and sort of the prejudice that comes up about that, and women going through puberty and women going through falling in love and having their heart broken and all this stuff. And my favorite's actually Protector of the Small, which is sort of eschews all of that coming of age stuff, and is just strictly about the sort of second female knight and her training. And because the first one was a girl posing as a boy, this one is just a girl going through the program as like a girl, and all the shit that she takes and all that stuff. But it's actually really well done book series, and like most women I know who are like avid readers absolutely love this book series. They grew up on it, and I think it would make an interesting universe, especially if you did it not quite in a like not as like mature as Game of Thrones, but sort of in a similar sort of like production design kind of thing, and having it very sort of rustic and feel like it's in a real world, as opposed to like a lot of the 80s sort of fantasy that was just awful. Like there's a reason why I'm not a big fantasy fan, and it took until Lord of the Rings to kind of convince me that fantasy can be done well. And I think the time is right for something like the Tortal series to be done well.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Ryan, what do you got?
Well, I mean, if you don't have anything more, Josh, just kind of
I'm
sign
sorry.
us out.
I honestly don't have. I have never heard of the series, so I kind of have to take James on his word on his pick.
Yeah, I didn't think you guys would know about it, but I wanted to throw it out there because it's a good series, and I think that a lot of I kind of want to raise awareness about it because I think that especially a lot of males don't necessarily know this book series, and it's as a male who read it, it's actually really well done.
Interesting. Okay. Ryan?
Well, Josh, we could almost, if you don't have anything else, we could almost close out on this one because this is something that we're all fans of here.
Okay. Well, I actually have one more. Then I have one last one. Then we'll do that one. Then we'll talk about yours at the last one. How about that?
Okay, cool.
Well, mine, I honestly, I know you both have heard of this, but I think again, I go back to the lore and how much meat is in this world. Now they are doing an animated series on Netflix that's done by it's going to be done by the Russo brothers. But I feel like if they made it into a TV show, the Magic the Gathering world would just be, I feel like it could be such a great fantasy story to tell. Now, what you'd probably want to do is definitely focus on a particular guild, or you probably want to do like a certain world, because there's many different worlds within Magic the Gathering. I think you'd almost want to focus on one particular world and go from there. So like the guilds of Ravnica would probably be what I would pick as probably sort of really tell, because there's different factions, there's different guilds that people are a part of, and I feel like you just pick one, focus on it, and focus on a story. That'd pretty much be the basic gist. I mean, do you guys know of Magic the Gathering as much as I do, or because me and my wife play it all the time?
I've actually never played it. I'm not familiar with the lore. I have heard podcasts about the creation of the game, which I thought was kind of fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never actually delved into of all the card games, the only one I've ever gotten into was Pokemon.
Gotcha. Yeah, and like I said, I started out playing the game, but then I just learned more about the lore from there. Like, because you have just different, really cool, guilds that I think could have a lot of good stories to tell. And I'm not really selling it on much, but anybody who knows Magic the Gathering knows the world I'm talking about. And I just think that would be, you focus it on a good story, a good long season of 45 minutes per episode, and I feel like you could really do it some good service. Kind of still the same, like I said, of Warhammer 40K.
Yeah.
But Ryan, all right. So Ryan, what is your last one we have for us? Going to wrap this show up.
Well, I would say that I would again, going back to the world of animation, going back to the world of even direct-to-video animation, where you're not trying to make a big budget movie, and it gives people with what DSC has done, it gives people the opportunity to sort of even to do things that would satisfy fans that they wouldn't be able to do on a larger scale, and maybe even redo certain things. I would like to see an anime style adaptation of all of our favorite book, Ready Player One.
Oh,
because
yes.
I feel like that was not done justice. That movie, in some ways, was hard. I mean, the fact that, and a little bit of a spoiler alert, if you haven't read the book, you've seen the movie, but the fact that they actually had those two characters meet,
definitely,
a third of the way through the movie, to me was the equivalent of having Romeo and Juliet survive. I mean, it just totally missed the whole damn point of the entire freaking book. And I feel like there was so many wasted opportunities in that adaptation. It didn't really, and I think that an anime adaptation, the interesting thing is, or I wouldn't even necessarily go for an anime adaptation. You want to go super low budget, go for a radio play. We all love Will Wheaton's narration. You don't even ask anyone to do the voice of Wade. Literally just take the sound bites from Will Wheaton and then have other actors come in. No one has to come in for Wade. And other actors come in and fill in. I'd love to see Mae Whitman, who's such a great voice actress, who should have probably played Artemis in the movie. She's way more like what she's described in the book. I'd love to see Mae Whitman come in and do the voice of Artemis. I believe me, I have my casting choices. I want to see Mike Myers and Dana Carvey as James Halliday and Ogden Morrow. I think that's interesting. That would have actually been the best, and such meta casting because they're 80s icons. But
90s.
Yeah, whatever.
Wayne's World was 93.
Okay.
Sorry, Wayne's World's one of my favorite movies. So
yeah, it's early 90s, definitely.
Yeah.
I actually pictured Jeff Bridges playing James Halliday for some reason. I don't know why I did. I just did. Now,
Mhm.
I think when me and Ryan talked about it when they first said they were going to be making a movie, I hoped, and if they were to redo it, I would want them to do it. I don't think they will because it was a box office success, and they're talking about making a sequel book, which is then going to make a sequel of the movie. But if they were to do it, I definitely would like to see maybe an animated version and more of a TV series, maybe.
I
But
think it would need to be a visual thing because so much of the it's great in a book form, but because of so much of what Wade and Halliday explore are
Mhm.
such visual mediums, like he's constantly talking about movies and video games and comic books, and I think that so much of it is visual that it would have like as great as a radio play would be. I think I would really want to see it done, um, either animated or live action.
Definitely. And even if they say by some weird stretch of the imagination they decided to retell the story, do what I said in the beginning. I feel like this book had so much meat to it that if you were gonna make a movie, do a 2-part movie. I mean, hell, the dumb Twilight books did it. Why can't this one? You know,
Yeah,
I mean, they make it a 2-part film because there's plenty of moments in the book where you could easily leave a major cliffhanger and then continue on from there. You know what I
do
mean?
kind of like a old style serial kind of.
Yeah, exactly. That'd be perfect. I just feel like that would be the best way to do it. Like because they left out so much in Ready Player One, and they try to put so much together so fast that I just feel like it missed out on a lot of its mark. Now, did I have fun watching it? Of course I did. I still had a good time.
There were
But
some great moments.
there's some really great moments.
Yeah.
That's my
Really?
thing. Is I like the movie. I understand its flaws, and I understand that it's not the book, but I still really enjoy the movie. I still enjoy a lot of the casting in the movie, especially Simon Pegg.
Simon Pegg was pretty good.
Was so good in so many different parts. And I think the guy who played Halliday, I liked the way they played him. He wasn't quite the way he was in the book, but I still really liked
I wasn't a
his
huge fan.
characterization and his journey. That said, something that was missing from the movies is I don't feel like they got into a lot of the lore deep enough. Now, you can't go too deep with this stuff because then you're just waxing nostalgic and it just becomes like you can do that in a book and talk about, an entire dungeon from Dungeons and Dragons or, playing Joust against, a CG character and whatnot.
I'd have been okay with that.
The movies need to have something a little bit more exciting. It's like I got that with the car chase instead of everything. Like, that's fine.
Yeah,
But
I'd like to see some deeper sort of dives into the mythology. The only thing I think would hold this back, and I think this is what held the movie back, are rights.
Yep.
Because
That's
in
the
order
reason.
to do a lot of this stuff, making reference to it is fine, but because you're doing it in a visual medium, you have to have permission to show these things. And
Exactly.
like one of the things that we actually were discussing in private conversation was the DeLorean from Ready
Back to the
Player
Future.
One.
Oh.
Well, in Ready Player One specifically, because it's an amalgamation of different vehicles, and in the movie, I feel like they kind of eschewed a lot of the, like they had the glowing lights on the front, and it was obviously like the time traveling DeLorean with the hover capabilities and whatnot, but like stuff like, I really wanted to see a proton pack. I know that's my own indulgence, but it's like I understand that you can't get rights to those things, so that stuff kind of falls to the wayside. And yes, I got Ninja Turtles in the background. It was unfortunately the Michael Bay ones, which
that was the biggest. That was the biggest face of the whole thing. Was they give us Ninja Turtles and it's the Michael Bay Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
Like that no
like
one
just
likes.
make new ones. Like Ninja Turtles are iconic enough. You're having like turtles jumping around. People are going to understand what they are. The only I understand why they did it because they're just recycling the assets from the previous film. So it's like they're not spending any money on rebuilding those things, but it's a cartoon turtle. It's not that hard to make.
Well, that was one of the things I knew going into when they were making the movie. I knew they were going to be handcuffed to rights and what I can show. I knew it was certain things belonging to different studios that they weren't going to be able to show certain things, and I was okay with that. But
that's still my problem isn't with I think we got lots of great references and that when Serenity showed up I lost my damn mind.
Well, it's not about the references for me. It's about the appreciation for like one of the things that really made me fall in love with the book was the story about the very first Easter egg in a video game and why that sort of inspired Halliday to create his sort of puzzle. And like that story about making that secret room and adventure and hiding the creator's name because they never got credit in those days. I think that's such a fascinating bit of like geek lore, and that's what made me fall in love with the book, was knowing that they have this appreciation for that history and exploring some of that stuff and tying it to why Halliday is doing what he does, as opposed to it just being a visual smorgasbord of like spot the character.
Yeah, and there was a lot of the things that we could easily dive into, like and when I think of the lore, I think about, well, why did Halliday put the first key on the school in the book, in the school grounds?
Yeah.
There was a reason he wanted to hopefully have someone like that be the owner, not just someone random, like kind of what they did with the movie. So I mean, there's a lot more that I wish they would have delved deeper into. That's why I feel like, again, with something like this, a TV series would have been perfect.
I think it would, like I said, as something. I think they're not going to do it. Obviously, this is totally just a pipe dream. But obviously, I would love to see an animated adaptation. I would love to even just get like a reading of the lines, like I said, adding to Will Wheaton's lines by other actors. But it's what we got. All we got is the movie, and it was a disappointment to me. So. Yeah,
I mean, that's kind of how it goes, though. When a book becomes a movie, they're gonna leave out so much that you're just not gonna be happy with.
Like, that's certainly the risk of doing these adaptations, is that it could go horribly wrong, and like that's what I acknowledge with Naruto and a few other ones. Like there's always the opportunity this isn't gonna go right, but this is sort of like the idea here is that this is our dream list, like things we.
Oh yeah.
In the best case scenario, like
Dragon Ball,
the thing that I keep coming back to.
Oh yeah.
The thing I keep coming back to is the MCU and how well they've done adapting their stuff and how faithful they are. And it proves to me that you can do faithful adaptation of these things when for a long time you couldn't do them and just people didn't try and they would try to do other things with it. I think the MCU is sort of like a perfect encapsulation of how you do it correctly. Not always. There's some things I don't enjoy and there's things I think they didn't quite get right. But for the most part, it's pretty spot on in its spirit, if not anything else. And
they told a new story. They took inspiration from the Infinity Gauntlet and made it into their own. And I feel like that's what was so refreshing about it. That's what we kept harping back to, is that we'll be able to do something like that. Get your inspiration, but make your own story.
Now, speaking of the MCU, I'm going to throw one more out there. I'm not going to go on for a long while about this, but I really want to see a live-action Miles Morales. I know that means my boy Tom Holland's got to die, but I'm okay with that because I think it's, if they're doing the ultimate story, which is the way I'd want them to do it, I want my on-screen Miles Morales.
Well, yeah, but you don't have to necessarily kill off Peter Parker.
They come from alternate realities.
Yeah. So.
In that case, then yes, I would absolutely want a live-action Spider-Verse, which is actually what was on my list, but because that is, first of all, been done in animation and done so well, and I don't know if they could go back to that well. Sorry?
I just think I was thinking Emma Stone would be willing to come back as Gwen Stacy if she came back as Spider-Woman.
That'd be cool.
I'd love that because Gwen's actually one of my favorite characters, and just give me Miles Morales, please. It's time. We need a Miles Morales.
They did reference that in one of the Spider-Man movies with they referenced that
Donald Glover,
Donald Glover was actually like the uncle of him. So
exactly. So Miles Morales is in the universe, but he's very young, and Peter Parker's still very young. I mean, the whole concept behind Miles Morales is that he comes in when Peter Parker is getting older, and I mean, so
no.
Years.
No. The original impetus was that Peter Parker died. Peter Parker died as a 15-year-old, and Miles Morales took over. Yeah, he died as a kid.
Okay.
I could maybe see that doing it more in the vein of like, if they really wanted to continue on the MCU, they would do it more in the vein like Iron Man, where you keep Peter Parker around and Tom Holland around, and you could eventually just kill him off if he wanted to do that and bring in Miles Morales that way. I feel like doing it now with the popularity of Tom Holland is getting as Spider-Man, it's too soon. But if you really wanted to take those baby steps and at least introduce him like they have, and give it some time, and eventually you can, he could easily be introduced from there. So, I agree. I would love to see him as well, but like I said, I feel like taking the baby steps first, like the MCU has always done, besides just forcing something in, would work better.
What I mean by now is like we're not going to see.
Yeah.
Like they're obviously planning the next Spider-Man film. They've already planned the next stage. Unless they're hiding something, it wouldn't be until like stage 5 of the MCU before we saw it. But I do think that like we can start moving on that stuff now, and I would love to I want Miles Morales. He's my boy. I want to see him.
Definitely.
I'm so excited for that video game.
It does look fun. It definitely looks fun. But all right, folks, that'll do us for today. Thank you very much for watching and listening. Mostly listening, probably, because you're more seeing the stills of our faces than actually seeing us. But more importantly, what did you guys think of our list? And the other thing I want to come back to you, if everybody in the audience, jump in the comments and let us know what you would love to see adapted into either a TV show or a movie. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. There's probably a ton of them we missed. I completely spaced on one, but we're running out of time. I got to give my daughter a bath. If we can we can even do this again sometime if they're down for it, because there was a couple I think I may have forgotten about. But jump in the comments, let us know your thoughts. Also, if you like what you watch, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you can receive more of our various content in the future. Again, also like us on Facebook, Twitter, and Stardust, and the links are in the description below as always. Again, thank you very much for watching. Again, I'm Josh Williams.
I'm Ryan Murphy.
I'm James Sheridan.
And thank you for keeping it real.
With ReelTime.
Yeah.
Good night.